getting skill and getting access, right? Spread, get the maximum reach, I think is part of that. As long as we got everybody hooked on DeepSeek or Kimi or Doubao or anybody in China, then we are still a Chinese AI in China. China wouldn't care much about the rest of the world using Chinese AI, but they do care a lot about Chinese people using Chinese AI.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. It's great to see you here again. This is Victor Orlovski at R136 Ventures, and this is a podcast, Ventures from the Valley. And we have here today a guest out of China and Singapore, who is not Asian though. He is a very rare example of a person who moved to China many years ago, learned Mandarin, and he's a professor at IMD, Chinese, I think, Shanghai office of IMD. And here is Mark Greeven, my friend, an amazing man. Mark, welcome.
Thank you so much, Victor, for having me on, and look forward to our conversation.
Thank you. Great, Mark. So let's go straight ahead. Maybe asking first, how did you end up going China, learning Mandarin? From what I know, you speak almost fluent and almost no accent. And what eventually brought you there? And just give us a little bit of your story. Also, would be very interesting to know, how do you position yourself like between investment strategy framework and Chinese innovation dynamics? So being a professor, you have to always like match those two things to teach your students, right? Or make your research. So please.
Yeah, no. So actually, it's about like 20 years ago, I wanted to study, really study innovation and entrepreneurship for a PhD topic, right? So and I was in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam, in my school there. And then of course, you can imagine, like, more than 20 years ago, where do I want to go? I want to go to Silicon Valley, right? So I was very excited. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this PhD. I got a supervisor. And then you're like, okay, so I'm ready. Innovation, entrepreneurship, technology, it must be Silicon Valley. And then she, who was at that time one of the few, or probably one of the only female full professors, he says, Mark, congratulations, but you're going to China. I'm like, oh, that's different. And I had no affinity with China whatsoever. I'm like, why? Right? Because China 20 years ago, innovation, technology, not entirely aligned with China, right? It was more a bit about imitation and copycats and all of that, right? And then she said, Mark, he says, just trust me. I've been to China so many times. I've seen entrepreneurship driving the Chinese economy for many years. So we were gonna see lots of innovation coming there from China. So basically, then I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. I'll probably stay for three weeks or so, or 3 months maybe, and I'll be out and I'll come back. And I never came back. So I never came back.
That's probably very much a Dutch way. So you accept it as a service. Okay, I was asked to go. I will go wherever it takes me. And that's amazing. So, how did you find like Shanghai 20 years ago? What was that? Can you Would you recognize city if you come now? Would you recognize Shanghai at age of 20 years less than now?
Yeah, no. So the fun part, Victor, is actually, I thought I was going to Shanghai or Beijing, right? But I didn't even go there. She sent me to the city of Hangzhou. So my first stop in China was Hangzhou. And I'm like, okay, they got this beautiful West Lake and they got all the green tea and all of that. That's lovely. But I mean, I'm sure I want to study innovation and technology. But then I got into Alibaba, right? And I got to meet Jack Ma. And I'm like, oh, hey, this is interesting. Actually something is going on here. And I saw the beginning, right? 20 plus years ago was the beginning of like the internet and the e-commerce kind of revolution from China, right? And it started in Hangzhou with Alibaba and their whole ecosystem. So, and at that time, I mean, it was not it was not Shanghai and Beijing, right? There were very, very few foreigners, which was obviously also the drive eventually to learn Chinese, because I could do nothing, right? I could do absolutely nothing. And what I wanted to do and what my research was about is I interview Chinese entrepreneurs, right? So, but then I find out, nobody speaks really English, or the vast majority did not speak English. So I started to learn Mandarin to be able to interview Chinese entrepreneurs, and I did. I interviewed over 400 of them in technology space in that time.
So you met Jack Ma, who is a famously known founder of Alibaba, and well, it's Amazon of China, and now pretty much Amazon of Asia. Or even more, I think it's like a global one. Did you interview him, and when? When was your first interview of Jack?
So that's a very funny story, actually. So I was a Dutch young guy, right? At that time, I was 21 when I started my PhD. I went to China. I know nothing about China. I know nothing about culture, but I had a goal, right? So I made some friends at Alibaba, people in marketing and all of that. And I said, how can I get to meet Jack Ma, or how can I get in touch? And then what happened is I joined the family day of Alibaba's Taobao, right? Taobao is the B2C e-commerce platform, and they organize every year. At that time, they organize a family day. So I joined as a so-called family member. Obviously, I was not a family member of one of the employees, which was hosted by Jack Ma. And of course, I sit in the audience and I'm asking a question, and he got it right. I mean, clearly, I was not a Chinese family member, because I really do not look Chinese, right? I can try my best, but I do not look Chinese. So then that was the way actually to connect.
And what was your impression? What made I'm sure you like familiar with a lot of Western leaders. What distinguishes? Maybe you can think of like top 5 people you interviewed, and sum up their characters, their qualities in a like portrait of Chinese innovation leader. How would he, and I'm sure we are speaking about men, I'm not sure if there is any woman who is like top entrepreneur in China, at least I haven't heard of. Maybe you can also give some names. So what's the difference between those men of this power and fortune in China versus like Western civilization type of a billionaire?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Victor. So I because I interviewed a lot of budding entrepreneurs, right? Maybe not very big, and also ones that have got very successful, right? One of my favorite ones is actually the founder of Haier, this consumer appliance company that also acquired GE Appliances about 10 years ago. And he, I think, if I take him as an example, I think has a couple of really interesting features, right? So one of the things I noticed over the years, and 20 years with Chinese innovation leaders, entrepreneurs, is this constant sense of, tomorrow we may fail. We're number one today, but tomorrow maybe we're not, right? And even some of the leaders, right? A company like Haier, or like an Alibaba, or you think about a Ping An, or like these big players, they're really good, right? They're really good at what they do, but to have this constant fear of, but it may end. I may no longer be number one tomorrow. And I think that sense of urgency is very, very typical, I think, for Chinese entrepreneurs and for Chinese innovators. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay. It's like paranoia that they will lose their actually their position on the market, right?
That's it. That's it. And constant paranoia. Even I'm worth billions and my company is doing well, right? I think the second thing is around very quickly looking for, I can do it alone, or I can do it with others together. I can work with partners. I can work in networks of other companies. So I think they're very quick in, even as smaller companies, even start to look for, how can I leverage resources and capabilities from other organizations, whether it is companies, whether it is local or global, whether even government. And I think that sits almost. I feel after 2 decades being there, it sits almost in the DNA of thinking about opportunity and creating opportunities. It's like can we get together to do this together, right? So building those kind of networks and ecosystems, if you like. I think that's another feature. And there was another fun thing. I was talking to one of the founders of one of the largest, actually, internet startup company that became very big, who basically said, Mark, one of the most important things for an entrepreneur here in China is, you cannot be too visible, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, right? We need to be humble enough. Now, that does not work for all founders.
Is it kind of like a culture, or is it Chinese Communist Party? What makes them to hide away from Watala, right?
I think there's I think you're yeah, you're pointing to two right directions, right? So one is, in China, it is good to be active and visible, but not too visible, right? You want to make sure that you keep everybody satisfied, and it's a continuous game of stakeholder management, right? So I think for entrepreneurs as well as for executives and business leaders. But there's also this element of, and I see this a lot, like companies like Midea, another really nice company to look at, founder led, very interesting company, no longer founder led, new CEO, Mr. Fang, and he actually makes it a point. He says, "I want to be invisible. Take away my photos of the walls. Get me out of this, right? Because if the company relies on me to survive, we're for sure not going to make it, right? So this idea that perhaps the power of the collective is more important than the power of the individual, right? And I think this is mainly culture. I think there's a cultural component to that. I think there's also pragmatism here, in the sense of like, don't look at me for doing all the stuff, right? So let's all work together. So I think I think that would be probably the third thing that comes to mind. And maybe one more is, and this has two sides of the same coin, right? I think Chinese entrepreneurs are really, really obsessed less with the product, more with the customer. And that sometimes means that we just make stuff, products, or use of technologies as pragmatic as we can, just to satisfy the customer. And that's great, right? Because we love customer centric solutions, right? We prefer to do that. But of course, it also means, like, if you really want to, like, completely out there disruptive breakthrough idea that the customer doesn't even know, that's harder to get, right?
Okay, so it means that Apple would never be born in China, right? Because obviously Steve Jobs was obsessed with the products, and he didn't care on the customer, because the customer would never invent iPhone, right? I mean, the customer would never dream of a device which has iPhone features, and you need to, like, imagine it and be obsessed with the product rather than with the customer. So does that mean that there will be no consumer products like Apple built in China? Like, I mean, Apple means, like a new generation of something, devices which are unseen, and which are not wanted by the consumers.
So 20 years ago, China, I would agree with that statement. China today, no longer. So today, the new generation of entrepreneurs, right? I'm talking about sort of a second big wave of entrepreneurs, which is very much science and technology driven, right? The people that drive, DeepSeek and Unitree, right? DeepSeek in AI and Unitree in robotics, they very much look for, I just want to bring something totally new to the world. But those companies have not yet reached the scale that you find with a Huawei or higher, right? But I think we're at the cusp, especially in the space of AI, chips and all of that, some fun stuff that China obviously cares about a lot about, where we're going to see some of that more, disruptive thinking and disruptive ideas.
We will come to that for sure, like future of entrepreneurship and startup community in China, with what risks and advantages, opportunities, and threats you see. But let's go back a little bit to, like, personal philosophy, if you will, and culture. of Chinese entrepreneurs. Speaking about Americans, I mean, there is a well-defined term, American dream, right? Which was there for last 150 years at least. An immigrant who comes poor, who comes with $1 or even less in his pocket, works hard, and then gets an amazing journey through his life. Carnegie and Rockefeller and Elon Musk, and name it. Most of them are poorest immigrants who made their fortune in their lifetime. And how would you then define a Chinese dream?
It's a great question, right? So Chinese dream, so it certainly exists, right? In particular, after the 1990s, when China started to reform and open up and encourage private entrepreneurship, um, and you find equivalents of let's say the Rockefellers, if you like, or the Elon Musks in China, but they're going to be Chinese, right? So the Chinese dream is very much for China, right? So it's a Chinese dream by and for Chinese people, and then there is
So to make China great again, right? So that's the Chinese dream. Okay.
to where China was, right? Because China was always great in history for the longest time, for millennials, right?
Absolutely. And so much innovation was coming from China. When I was thinking and asking you about this iPhone, I mean, iPhone is nothing compared to Compass and Silk, and name it, right? Yeah, I mean, it's like amazing how much they built through the history. Yeah, it's like
There's a- and I think that kind of like sort of national pride, right, on like, hey, we can be super innovative, I think is returning. And in particular, with the age of AI, we see a lot of confidence. Like, hey, we don't have to be just, incremental innovators. We can actually come up with the disruptive stuff as well. Just the way we do it is maybe different than we see in Silicon Valley or in Europe, but we have done it. We can do it again, right? So I think that proud, that sort of national proud is there back again.
what about like comparing it with the Silicon Valley? And I can speak of Silicon Valley. If you think of like three qualities in this location, I would say, in this specific geography, and that's not far from being similar to the rest. So, as you know, Silicon Valley is a very tiny piece of land between San Francisco, which I would include into like the term, and San Jose, which is probably like 100 miles or a little bit more. So there are probably three distinguished qualities I would name. First, indeed, you feel home. And I'm an immigrant who moved to Silicon Valley when I was already pretty old. So I was like close to my 40s. And like it's a true culture where everyone is welcome. So you do not feel yourself a foreigner, like from the moment you step on Silicon Valley land, despite your accents, despite your skin color, and whatever, right? Second, you really appreciated by your um, ability to like deliver, and you're ambitious. So you are distinguished by that, how ambitious you are, and uh, how big, how much, I mean, how big goals do you set? How big are the goals you set? And obviously, how much you work to achieve those goals. So success is defined as a multiplier of your ambitious and the effort you put into solving the problem, whatever problem you think is the right problem to solve, right? And the third is obviously famously known tolerance to failure. That there is no like failed entrepreneur in the Silicon Valley who has like a watermark. I'm a failed entrepreneur, right? And then nobody would give money or respect to this person. So if you think of like three qualities that makes Chinese innovation so great, what are those three?
Yeah. So they would have only one in common of the three. So diversity, right? Clearly not, right? I mean, China is not a place for immigration. It's a place which is obviously dominated, including the landscape of venture capital, private equity, and entrepreneurship by mostly local people. There's exceptions, but mostly. But aspiration and work ethic, absolutely number one, right? So when you think about what's the culture for entrepreneurialism and innovation in China, aspiration, so thinking big, thinking crazy, and then put in like the crazy hours, this is really, really a feature. I would say it's a very important feature. I think the second feature of that culture is really that um ecosystem culture. I mean, it's a place where everything is done with everybody else, right? It is all about building, not only building the social networks, right? It's not just about the informal networks. It's actually about building solutions quicker, faster, because in the end of the day, speed, number one criteria, right? It matters to be fast. It matters to be first. It matters to be as fast as possible to the market, right? So if you say sort of three features: aspiration, work ethic, working through ecosystems, and ultimately getting speed. And
So, so acceptance to failure is not in Chinese culture, right? I mean, it's not like what they would really appreciate. Yeah, that's funny. Mhm. That's funny that they still kind of like take risk, right? I mean, there are indeed great entrepreneurs in China, and entrepreneurship in any way is a risky thing. So it means that they know how to risk. I just met, I can't really name a company, but it's one of the largest companies in China. And you mentioned it in our earlier conversation. I met the HR man who was working for this company. I think it was like a little bit of pre-COVID time, maybe 2019. And he is a Chinese guy. He became my friend. And he was working as an HR headhunter for top executive positions for Chinese companies out of the US. But they were looking only for Chinese. And I was thinking that this is like a repatriation program or something, like a governmental program. He showed me that this is not. It's like a very commercial thing. And I asked him why they're looking for people like Chinese out of the US. What was the reason for that? And he said that the management of the company is looking for entrepreneurs rather than just managers. So there are so many great managers, like amazing quality, very deep experience, knowledge, everything you need in China. But people are really lacking entrepreneurship, like taking risk. So those Chinese who moved to the US and spent some time in the US in companies or in academia, they are much more risk takers than those Chinese who are in the mainland China and who has never been abroad. Do you share this view? And if it is true, why so?
So it's interesting. So the exact statement, I can find exact opposite evidence. So it is true and it's not true, right? So in my experience, large companies, especially the ones that are around for a little longer, they do struggle to find entrepreneurial talent. I would agree there. But if I look at entrepreneurs themselves, there's no lack of risk taking. There's no lack of allowing failure. It's just that we don't talk about it as much, right? So it's not like a sort of a symbol of like look at me. But we manage risk in different ways, right? So for instance, this whole idea of working together through networks and ecosystems is to reduce my risk. And if I fail, I may get another opportunity in my same network that I can jump onto, and nobody will care that I didn't succeed, right? But we will not talk about it, right? So that's a big difference, right? So I think for me, I think the example your friend gave, I think is very, very true, especially for large companies. It's hard to find that type of entrepreneurial talent that wants to work for a larger company. At the same time, you find plenty of people that take that risk either out of choice, like I have a dream, I want to build something, or because it's actually a super competitive environment. I have no choice. I have to become an entrepreneur. Right. So there's a lot of people in China became entrepreneurs because they have to. Right. China has not always been, bountiful and rich, right? So there is a long period where a lot of entrepreneurs did this out of necessity, not out of, dreams and all of that.
Actually, I want to ask one more question on that front. Before we go into startups and like startup ecosystem and how to start companies in China, how to like develop companies in China. The question is about this cooperation you mentioned, that Chinese are amazingly cooperative. And I would qualify Chinese economy as one of very few economies in the world which remain to be capitalist nature, right? Although it's like all governed by Communist Party and it's stated that it's like they're building socialism, they're far from going that way. And it's very, very much a capitalist country. And it means that there is a harsh competition going on there, right? So capitalism is versus socialism is all about, is there a competition around or not, right? In socialist economy, whether you think of Finland, um, Holland, or whatever you would imagine, former Soviet Union, there is little competition going on, right? Because there is no incentive for competition. In China, it seems that there is incentive, right? Because it's like amazingly competitive. Yet, in amazingly competitive environment, it is really hard to cooperate, right? Is you just need to compete tough because that's all about like survival, right? I mean, every company, and you mentioned it, you said every company is in a survival mode, right? Like even it's like the hardest, the biggest company in the industry, like Huawei or Alibaba or name it, it's like a very, very tough competition going on. And we see this competition, for example, in electric vehicles. I don't know, there are probably 20 providers, I mean, manufacturers, auto manufacturers there, out competing each other. So my question, how do they solve this dilemma between like being highly competitive and being highly cooperative? So where they find this kind of tiny balance between those two?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? So spot on, right? Super competitive environment, yet surprisingly collaborative. So I think there's two elements of that collaboration that kind of explain it. Like one is Chinese companies are looking for collaborations with complementers, right? So these are companies or organizations that have capabilities that they don't have, right? So then in China you have this massive advantage because the whole world supply chain sits in China, right? In the example of automotive, there's plenty of companies to work with, right? There is a whole ocean of companies to work with, and that's because China is still the number one powerhouse of manufacturing, right? So by looking for companies that can help them get access to capabilities, we're not collaborating directly with our competitors, right? So that's one, and it's possible because the market is so huge that there's a lot of place to find those collaborations in the market, right? Now, then the other thing is, everybody knows that of the 500 companies that jump on the same opportunity, the vast majority is going to fail, and that's also a business case for then, well, if we fail, we could also merge some of our operations. We can work together. We can actually consolidate, but we cannot consolidate not in an overly aggressive way. We can consolidate in a way, I'm not going to win this. You're going to win this. Let's call it a day, right? And I think we see this industry by industry, except for the moment in the EV industry. So the EV industry went down a rabbit hole of, price go down, cost go down, price go down, cost go down, to the point that nobody is winning anymore.
Why? I mean, consumer is winning. For sure. I mean, nobody. You mean none of the companies do, but consumers do win, right?
That's right. That's a great point. Actually, the consumer, in the end of the day, is happy with the very affordable cars. The problem is that at some stage nobody can afford to make the cars anymore. So that's a challenge, right? So collaboration is a little bit out of that industry right now. And I think even the government is looking at that, and is saying, like, hey, people, can we please shut down the cost competition a bit, right? Because it's that's not good for anybody. So but
Does government intervene into this kind of stuff, like pushing a little bit more of competition, pushing a little bit less of competition? So there is like a gear, so they're just managing it, right?
Absolutely, right. And it's not in unsavory ways, right? It's basically saying, like, they pick up the biggest players, they get them together in Beijing and say, people, let's talk about this. Everybody at the table. This is not sustainable. I would like you, as a government, I would like you to not do that. Now, there may not be a policy, but it's a clear message. Obviously, if you want to keep your support, if you want to keep your subsidies, if you want to keep your tax cuts left and right, you better start to work together as an industry, right? So this is industrial policy making in practice, very pragmatic, helping industry to remain competitive or become more competitive.
Thanks. It's a great observation. So let's move on. I think that we are more or less half of our podcast now. So the second half, I would dedicate more to startups and less to like large and largest companies in China. So my first question, maybe it's like a little bit of provoking. Do you know any foreigners, not Chinese nation foreigners, not repatriated Chinese, who started their like tech companies in China and who succeeded? Maybe you can give some inspiring examples so other non-Chinese nation will come and join Chinese vast market and be successful there.
Right. So we have to go pre-COVID for that, to be honest, right? So post-COVID, obviously a lot of foreigners have left China, right? And we see them slowly trickling back. There's plenty of successful entrepreneurs, as in, not massively skilled, but successful in their own right, building technology, whether it's in Shenzhen or Shanghai or Hangzhou or Beijing. But there's also a few examples of really big wins. So one of my favorite examples is actually a fellow Dutchman who founded a company called Tudo, which is many years ago was basically a video sharing type of platform that he set up in Shanghai. That was became actually the dominant platform for video sharing, not unlike a YouTube before that time, and became very, very successful. And which was basically, founded and run by him and his local business partner, but he was the CEO of the company. And his name is also Mark, but Mark with a C, Mark van der Gijs, who I'm sure would have lots of war stories to share. I think he later moved out, and I don't think he's still in China at the moment. But
if you introduce me to him and he would agree to speak at our podcast, that would be amazing. Yeah.
I think so. I think he would be. I think he would be willing. I think he would be willing there. So, and that example, I mean, and you can imagine, right? Tudo and YouTube, that's like last generation video platforms. That is pre TikTok and all of that. So the fact of the matter is, not many. I think that's the reality, right? I think there is a need. I think lots of cities would like to have more successful tech entrepreneurs to win in China. The reality is it's not yet attractive enough. I don't think it's attractive enough for two reasons. One is, of course, recreating an environment that Silicon Valley has is impossible. I think that's an undoable task, right? That has a lot of history. And second, I'm going to be really critical here. The capital markets in China are just not attractive. I mean, honestly speaking, the capital markets, stock markets are just not attractive. So
I noticed, yeah. I'm an investor in some of Chinese stock companies, just holding Chinese stock. It doesn't look like a wise investment. Yeah.
I mean, if you're very, very short term and you're very smart and you have a bit of luck, you can make money, huh? But it's It's big, and it's big picture, not so attractive. And I think governments, local governments, central government, they know it. But
So yeah. Let's start one by one now. So let's switch to a Chinese talent who is studying now tech in one of the Chinese best universities. By the way, if you name a few which are equivalent of Berkeley and Stanford, that would be nice. And so this young man has an idea, right? What does he do with this idea? And he wants to take a risk of pursuing his idea and building up something. So, what's his journey? Tell me, like step by step, where he goes to.
what do you do, right? So let's take the two most inspiring universities for this, right? One in Beijing is Tsinghua University, and one in Hangzhou, my former hometown, Zhejiang University, right? The two tech universities, engineering schools in China. So the very first thing they will do is look at their alumni. So the vast majority of opportunities are created by a person with an idea. By the way, could be a woman. So China has quite a few female entrepreneurs in tech. Um, and first stop is talk to my alumni. My peers in the group, and in particular, Tsinghua University and Zhejiang University have very powerful alumni networks, which means
Do they have like angel clubs or something? Mhm.
private equity, venture capital, angel clubs, either alumni that invest in other alumni. This is number one source of capital, by the way, or access to government resources, because a lot of alumni sit in government, like local governments, right? So, and in China, you need to have three things.
Is it common? Is it common that you having like an idea and you come and apply for government like sponsorship or whatever investments? Is it kind of grants you applied for, or what? What is that?
It would be more so. It would not be the typical route. The typical route would be, I find, private money with angel investors.
Okay, so there are basically clubs like whatever, like alumni clubs. So you go and speak to someone who already made a fortune and who is willing to support those who actually are from the same alma mater. Mhm.
And the other thing is, like, there's quite a lot of science parks and incubation centers by universities that are quite successful, right? So Tsinghua has X Lab, Zhejiang University has a whole ecosystem of supporting their graduates and their alumni to start up businesses, right? So and they provide partly money, but also access to like labs and all of this, right? So I think universities like these do play a big role in that. I would say that's probably step number two. And then maybe later on it might be government and government subsidies, because in China, if you have your alumni, you got your university connection and credibility, and then you need to get government, right? Because you need to have government on board somewhere somehow, so that you can either benefit from local policies or make sure that you're on the right train.
Mhm. So I think that what makes like a little bit of maybe not a little bit, but quite a difference from the US, right? I mean, you basically go all the way private route, all the way to either M&A or IPO, right?
That's right. I can tell you a story, Victor. So sometimes I'm part of these kind of panels with venture capitalists. First question for an idea. Somebody pitches an idea. First question: is it part of a policy direction? Yes or no? Answer is no. Forget about the idea. Answer is yes. Hey, this might be good, because if it is part of a national policy or even a local policy direction, it will have support.
So tailwinds, when you try to find, because every entrepreneur, especially a startuper, tries to find a tailwind, and I actually compare it always like with the sailing board, uh, 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 sailing boat. Sorry. So it's like you need to have a tailwind. You can have a headwind, then you still can go. You could have no wind, right? No wind means that you do not want to be there, right? Because you do not have any other means but your sail to actually start. But obviously, to have a tailwind is something good. So tailwind in China means it's supported by a government, right? This is within the policy. how, I mean, other entrepreneurs that are challenging the policies say, I mean, it's not a policy now, but it's going to be policy tomorrow. That's the reason I'm investing now. I mean, it's like a smart way of doing it, right? I mean, to like a little bit predict the future, because wherever it is in the policy, it's already like thousands of people doing it, right? So you do like something what is like opposite to a policy, hoping that the policy will change. Are there like ways of doing that? Are there some any like insiders, any communities that think through what and how policies may change? And I'm sure that there are lobbyists there, right? I don't know to what extent the lobbyism exists in China with all these oligarchs and entrepreneurs pushing government this or that way.
I'd say the concept of lobbying is pretty alien in China, and it would not be considered as such. But this is where the alumni come into game, right? So a very rich and powerful alumni network will give me insight on where's the policy going, which direction, and more importantly, which location. Because national policy will be implemented in different ways in different parts of China. Some cities, that's right, of course, because basically the government also says, I do not know if this is going to work, so I try it out in these cities, and we see if it works. If it works, we scale it to other cities. If it doesn't work, policy is a failure. Fine, we lost in 3 cities. So as an entrepreneur, you want to be aware of that. You want to know where's going to be the policy experiment next. Can I jump on it? Can I get the benefits? Even if it eventually fails, right? I mean, it's still a good bat to have, right? So I think this is, I suspect this is quite different from other parts of the world, but it is definitely part of life of an entrepreneur.
And how far can you go? So in the US, it's common that you can basically raise like billions of dollars, right? If you are successful, if your product is compelling, and you can make like huge rounds, right? SpaceX, OpenAI, Anthropic show the path of dozens of billions of dollars in financing. So what about China? If you are successful enough, can you go further away and get billions? And if so, then who is gonna give you those billions?
Yeah. So that happened only once in history of China's venture capital. So China venture capital started in 2001, right? The beginning of that industry. That was only during the mobile internet craze, right? Which is, think about the Didi and Meituan and all of the sort of the delivery companies, the taxi hailing companies, the ride hailing companies, all of this. They got the $1 billion, rounds, right? And they got that from mostly private money, huh? But that time is gone. So today, especially for consumer products, it's very, very difficult to get that amount of money raised. For deep tech, right, which is now the focus for China, right? Deep tech companies, the numbers are never that big, right? Because it's always much more niche. It's not mass market. It's more industrial. So I think it's unlikely that we will see those amounts of billions of dollars being raised today in China. I think it's unlikely. And there's one other thing that's important to realize is that 15 years ago, a lot of that risk capital was also not only Chinese, right? So we got like Sequoia, we got SoftBank, we got, there's plenty of capital, Temasek, right? From this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of like the US based Silicon Valley based venture firms like Benchmark and Sequoia and Greylock, I believe, DST. They were in China and they were big in China.
That's right. So that round, like in the consumer mobile internet time, that was like that. Then you got the same Silicon Valley type of valuations and all of that. But that's no longer the case, and for 2 reasons, right? One is the focus shifted to deep tech. The other one is, that amount of foreign capital, risk capital, is just, has dried up significantly, right? So that's a fact.
Well, so it's harder to build companies in China, but yet we see a lot of great companies, new companies, and you mentioned Unitree, and there are a bunch of other robotic companies that are at a cutting edge in the world's cutting edge, global cutting edge technology coming out of China. So my question is about like academia and entrepreneurship, especially startup building. So in the US, it's famous and common, if you will, to be a professor at Stanford, to Berkeley, like Sergey Levine, who built physics AI, a bunch of Stanford professors who built companies in different fields, famously known in Impossible Food, which was all built by Stanford academia research folks who actually moved like a team. It was not like one professor, but the entire team moved, built Impossible Foods. So is it common in China? Do professors, do academia go and build something? That's the first thing. Second, how, I mean, how much of freedom does like research or uh, teaching professor or whatever postdoc have on IP rights? So in the US, it's like pretty common that you build something and then it's yours, right? I mean, you build something in academia and then it does not belong to academia or to the state. Even it is built on academia, on state money in a way. So you take it and you do whatever you want with it, right? So is it same in China? Is it like supporting the innovation overall?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, right? So one of the important things about China is always to have a time in mind, right? So the 20 years ago entrepreneurs, like the ones that we see now, like the Alibabas of the world, or the the Hires and the Huawei's and all of those, right? So that this first generation, if you like, they were, none of them came from academia, right? This was basically grassroots entrepreneurs that see an opportunity, jump on it, and build from there, right? And they build, and many of them have technical capabilities, right? If you think about CATL, right, where the world's largest battery innovator, the founder of that company, Robin Zeng, is a chemist, right? And he loves his batteries and battery technology. But he did not come from a time where China had massive academic positions and scientific rules and roles and all of that, right? So that generation, no, the answer is no. But now I look today, a lot of entrepreneurs now come exactly from, the PhDs from Tsinghua, overseas returnees from Stanford. They built their businesses based on technology they developed with the teams, either inside or outside of China. Right. So there's so many examples of entrepreneurs today that are, science driven, if you like, and many of them have positions at universities today. So this is, I was looking at a company, really interesting company. They make the technology for smart glasses that went into the Xiaomi smart glass, right? So I cannot name the company name, but it's one of the technology providers for that solution. That guy is a professor in material science, in fact, on like a type of foil, or type of, sort of, what is it, like a little skin layover that goes on a glass. And he has been doing this for like research for 20 years, and he built an application and he commercialized that, and then he has his own company and then licensed the technology to Xiaomi. So that exists, what today. But that's the 40-year, 40 to 50-year-old generation, right? That's not the 60-year generation, the first generation.
Hmm. Well, and I just always look into how much research is coming from Chinese universities and academia on AI, for example, and robotics, and definitely outperforms the US research, especially with this recent immigration policy, right? It's getting less and less. I mean, I just have a question, which is more maybe a future look at future, like a forecast, and that would just be kind of a final theme I would touch upon. So obviously there are a few major like races now going on in technology. I would name a few. First is compute power, who will advance in compute power. And I believe it's not yet clear whether, and obviously we're talking China versus the US. I mean, there are two rivals here. And frankly, I do not understand this rivalry in the age, I mean, of like 21st century. And it looks like crazy for me that this competition between states is going on. And when you say like Chinese dream is just make China great again. I do believe you could not make any nation great again now without like making the whole world a better place, right? I mean, it's just, I mean, the time when you can build something in expense of others is over, right? You can only build it for all or build it for none. But anyway, so that's unfortunately the mindset of people who are in power now. So my like compute challenge would have no winner now. I mean, clearly the US is a way ahead, and it will take a lot of time to catch up. So second is energy, and I think that energy, that where Chinese has won, and there is no way to catch up with them. There is no way to even compete. So China has won this game. And there are two more. One is probably foundational AI, where the competition is head to head. It's like very dense and very intense between China and the US. And the last is robotics, and robotics is a little bit of a derivative to AI, but you also have a lot of like mechanical engineering to be involved, and there you clearly see China is winning. So my question is first AI. Uh, so think of AI. China wins the AI race versus the US wins the AI race, and then there is a global kind of AGI, whatever you think of this term could be, and there are many ways to interpret it. So there is Chinese AGI wins versus the US AGI wins. How this will change the world anyway? Like if it will change the world anyway. So what will be an implication to that going forward? Same. I mean, I don't think there is a need to like describe what if the US wins, right? I mean, probably the world will stay more or less what it is. But Chinese, I mean, why I'm thinking about Chinese AI or AGI is that it will just have a tremendous impact on culture as well, right? It will just not be technology. It will just streamline our mindsets, right? It will be a perfect storyteller, first of all, a philosopher, and then we will be a little bit more Chinese, not through DNA, but through the cultural influence. So, what do you think the world is gonna be if China wins in AI race, and how you would assess the chances of them winning?
So it's here is so interesting. So I mean, what China's AI is going to do, China is going to bring AI to the masses, right? This is the objective, right? Make it as cheap as possible for everybody to use. And I think that we see that happening right now, right? So they may not come up with the best or the most fast or the most advanced, but they will make sure that it's in the hands of most people. And then it's a question of what will the world.
And that's the reason why most of the Chinese models are open source, right? Is it a policy? It's policy, right? It's not an entrepreneur decision. Okay, I do it like open source. I do it like something else. So it's a policy, right? All models must be open source. You need to give it to people, right? Is it that the way? Like
It's I would say it's not a it's a suggested direction. It's not a policy. So, and then again, right, keep in mind, speed matters. Open source is faster, right? So that's the other thing, right? So it is.
I would agree. I wouldn't agree with you actually. I think that closed loop is faster, but open source is stickier. Because I mean, I'm an investor in open source companies, and I'm an investor in IP holders. I mean, just companies that do it conventional way. In my experience, open source takes way longer, but less money. That's true. So to actually evolve open source, you do not need to throw billions of dollars in marketing. If you just do it slowly, uh, uh, um, bottom up, not top to bottom, and that what makes it stickier, but it's longer. But I think that there is like philosophical speaking, I probably understand why Chinese are doing that way.
I mean, getting skill and getting access, right? Spread, get the maximum reach, I think is part of that, right? And I think the other thing is, I'm not sure if it's about cultural influence abroad, but I do think it's about cultural influence at home, right? So as long as we got everybody hooked on DeepSeek or Kimi or Doubao or anybody in China, then we are still a Chinese AI in China. I think it's important to distinguish that China wouldn't care much about the rest of the world using Chinese AI, but they do care a lot about Chinese people using Chinese AI, right? So I think it's not a look for cultural influence, but it's making sure at home everybody stays in peace and in harmony, right? So and for me, for the rest of the world, it's gonna be, are we willing to build a tech stack that includes both US and China? Because this is what I'm hearing, right? This is what I'm hearing with large companies and small companies, whether it's here in Asia, they're like, we like some pieces of the Chinese AI tech stack, but not all pieces. So maybe chips gonna be this one, maybe cloud's gonna be that one, maybe the application is gonna be something else, right? So I think we're gonna look at a world where the question really is, will we really embrace hybrid AI tech stacks rather than one versus the other? And I think the winning formula is going to be the hybrid tech stack. But that's also a cultural, political, competitive question. But in Asia, I think hybrid is going to win. I think it's going to win.
Well, thanks for this, all these amazing inspirations and these amazing thoughts you gave, and like your thoughtful and very deep answers. I have probably the last one before we wrap up, and it's more philosophical rather than just about technology. Though technology drives philosophy in 21st century for sure. And my question is about like younger, like Z population Z of China, and there are less and less people in China. Like, I mean, it's a declining population as we know, but there are still plenty of young people because like it's a billion people, and obviously there are a lot of young people there. So, do you think that there is a convergence of culture uh, uh, between like China and the rest of the world? And I'm not speaking about like in particular Western culture. There are a bunch of like Asian cultures like Japanese, South Korean, Vietnamese, Indian, name it, Russian. So um, do people like culturally in China become more isolated, more Chinese, or more international? I think it's a much it's a very important question because China is very influential and will become more and more influential on the global scene. So I think it's important to see whether like Chinese kids or young people are more internationally minded with this diverse culture, or more Chinese minded and like nationalist kind of like minded. We are Chinese and we only do the way Chinese do things for the future of the globe. So how you see it? Because some people say it's like deglobalization is going on, like like the countries are falling apart, like global alliances are falling apart. Some say, oh, it's not true because like economic data doesn't show it. So, but it all depends on what people actually think and how they behave. So if they become like this new generation is becoming more international, more socially diverse, it brings like more to the world of global world with like globalization patterns rather than deglobalization. So your observation would be very much because you are teaching, right? You are in the university, you see it. It's I think it's an important question for the mankind. So be serious.
I love your question, and I agree with you. I think the real future sits in the next young generation, and how what's their mindset, how they look at the world, right? So So I'm optimistic on that front. So I do think that the younger, let's where we call them Gen Z or whatever you want to call them, I think have a lot in common with global young people. So and it means in terms of the kinds of things they look at, the things they care about, access to information, right? So all of this generation, this young generation, like people that are in their early 20s or so, I think are very, very global in that sense, right? And much more than, let's say, a generation before that, and more critical to the past ways of working in China, right? So this idea of, you know, just keep working until you die is no longer as appealing for that younger generation, because they say, well, I also want to I want to make an impact. I want to make sure that what I do contributes to the world. I care about topics like sustainability. I care about, well-being, right? These are topics that are in a way new to China, if you like, but the young generation puts them, front and center. So that's a bit of a, I think a move towards global, sort of global mindset, right? But, and there's always a but in China, right? Every sentence in China has a but. The reappreciation of classic Chinese culture, so let's say old Chinese culture, ancient culture, is also very, very visible, right? Simple example to finish with. I was in Beijing. I walk on the street, city center, the really the CBD of Beijing, and the vast majority of people walk around in the street wearing traditional Chinese clothes, young people. And then you wonder, that's a reinvention or rediscovery of classic culture. So, in a way, the Chinese consumer, the young Chinese, next generation entrepreneurs, is a bit of a paradox. Very global on the one hand, but also deeply rooted culturally, which is both different from the past generation.
And it's not a contradiction. As soon as you can wear a traditional clothes, and you still can think global, right? And I've seen it in UAE, for example. It's like amazing how people think. I mean, they are wearing their traditional this white dresses, and they think absolutely global. They enjoy speaking to those who are with the pesachs and wearing kippas, and they respect it. And I mean, it's just I mean, you can actually uh, you can even benefit from that, because you do not need to. I mean, there are ways to be like international, and we think of that like going Starbucks, watching Hollywood movies, eating like whatever McDonald's, whatever it is, right? And watching YouTube, right? It does not make you international, right? You can still enjoy Chinese food, you can still wear Chinese dress, and you still can be like internationally minded, right? It does not prevent you from being respectful and grateful for all other foreign cultures, and respect the world as it is, and you do not show disrespect by wearing your local clothes and having like your Chinese hamburger or whatever it is, right? And eating with sticks rather than just with our knife and fork. Anyway, so I think that was a fantastic conversation, Mark. Thank you. I would enjoy doing it once again. I think we haven't covered a lot of topics. I was thinking to ask you. You know, I just saw this article in the information. It's a popular online media where they say that competition between China and the US is basically in AI is basically competition between Chinese in the US and Chinese in China. So which is true. My son is a graduate, Berkeley UC Berkeley graduate, and he's working for one of this AI startups now. And like majority of people he's working with are Chinese, and that's amazing how like Chinese are competing, and I think that's great. Really, I mean, at the end of the day, I hope that they will definitely do something good for the mankind. But again, thank you so much for this great discussion, Mark. It was Mark Greeven, my friend, a professor at IMD campus in Shanghai, right? Is it Shanghai these days?
So actually, our campus is in Shenzhen right now. So we've moved to the south of China. the capital of tech and
Okay. Okay, and Mark is fluent in Mandarin, lives 20 years or more already in China, and enjoys that. And he is a great expert in whatever Chinese technology, economy, entrepreneurship is. So I'm sure you may find his LinkedIn profile and apply to him if you want to know more about China or do business in China. Thank you very much, Mark. So that was Victor Orlovski and Mark Greeven. This podcast was brought to you by R136 Ventures, and it is called Ventures from the Valley. Please subscribe and enjoy our conversations going further. Thank you.
Ventures from the Valley is brought to you by R136 Ventures.
To find out more about R136 Ventures and how we scale mid to late stage startups by unlocking their true potential through investment,
visit r136.vc. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, make sure to click and subscribe so you don't miss any further episodes.
On behalf of our team here at R136 Ventures, thanks for listening.